So let's get started. Please join me in welcoming the host of our symposium, Kathy Young, the Executive Director of the Center of Excellence at Cornell Agritech and most trusted and valued advisor to the symposium stage. Kathy?
Thank you very much, Jen. Good morning and welcome to Grow New York. The Center of Excellence for Food and Agriculture at Cornell Agritech shares the Grow New York program's goal of growing an enduring food and agriculture innovation cluster in New York. And I personally share that goal. Raised on a dairy and grain farm in Livingston County, serving as a state legislator, chairing the New York State Senate's Agriculture Committee and New York State's Rural Resources Commission, I understand all too well the challenges faced by people working in the agriculture industry and in food production. And in my role as Executive Director of the Center of Excellence, or as we call it, the COE, I'm honored to work in service of New York's food and farming sector, leveraging Cornell's institutional resources and expertise to cultivate innovation, economic growth, and job creation. We at the COE have a motto: push, pull, grow. We push entrepreneurs and startups to launch their businesses in New York State. We pull companies into the state by connecting them with innovation resources and economic development partners. And we grow existing food, beverage, and agriculture-related businesses from across New York through business mentoring, technical assistance, and other resources they need to succeed and thrive. In this year's symposium, we are exploring the innovations that can help our food and agriculture systems stay healthy and strong during this period of tremendous transformation and climate crisis. Please join me in welcoming Lyndon Archer, the Joseph Silbert Dean of Engineering at Cornell University's Smith School of Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering, to the stage to talk about where the 2030 Project, a bold initiative intended to mobilize researchers to develop tangible solutions to our warming world, intersects with food and farming. Dean Archer. Welcome,
Good morning.
Dean. Good morning to you.
Thank you, Kathy.
So great to be here. So we're very excited about the 2030 Project, but before we get into that, you came to your role as the Joseph Silbert Dean of Engineering at Cornell from being the David Kroll Director of the Cornell Energy Systems Institute. The college you lead is organized into 4 strategic areas: advanced materials, complex systems, network science, and computation, bioengineering and energy and the environment. Where does engineering intersect with the food and agriculture production industries?
Well, thank you. So before answering, I think it's probably the statement that the engineering dean is kicking off this summit and Grow New York. And I think that speaks volumes about the importance of working across boundaries, thinking through silos as we look at big problems. And so to answer your specific question, I would say all of it. Right? When we think about the historical evidence that shows that there's more carbon stored in soils than we might imagine, and we sort of have learned more, work from Johannes Lehmann and others, it is clear that it's a kind of materials science, a materials chemistry issue, how carbon interacts with materials in the soil, and how we can do that intentionally to create deeper, longer-lasting reservoirs for carbon is, of course, a problem that is an agriculture problem, but it's one that's fundamental to our material science priority. we think about the future of ag, right? We think about the role technology and big data is going to play in guiding solutions that are global and impactful. And again, that's a place where complex systems and information science components in engineering do play a role. So I think it's really an exciting time for Cornell to have pivoted from our commitment to our climate action plan goals. That is, by 2035, we want the campus to be carbon neutral, but importantly to use our technologies to have impact in the world, to now focus on 2030 as a time frame where action is actually going to be critical. So I hope that answers your question, that engineering is in all of it, because the questions don't come with labels, engineer, CALS, science. They require solutions.
So any large organization sometimes naturally comes in with silos. And how does the 2030 project break down those silos that we may have at Cornell?
Yeah, so, well, one of the things that drew me here to Cornell some 22 years ago was that I like to tell people that we are just surrounded by excellence. I think it's the corollary to any person, any study. It is not just any study, it's any study at a certain frontier of the discipline. And I think what the 2030 project does is sort of galvanizes that sort of ecosystem of excellence towards solving a problem that needs it, right? So you think about where we are, 200 years, after the second industrial revolution, when engineers promised all sorts of cool innovations from technology, electrification, and so on. And we are at a climate crisis, right? A problem that's existential to humanity. It does require us to sort of, roll our sleeves up. And as my colleague Ben Holton is going to say in a couple days' time, we've got to bend that carbon curve. We've got to bend that warming curve. And we've got to do it in a way that recognizes there are equity issues involved. And I think, again, Cornell leads in thinking about this in the context of a time limit, right? 2030, which is the time limit that we can talk about, during the course of the discussion this morning, but one that I think is crucial for humanity's goals of getting us that maximum, 1.5 degrees warming before the end of the century.
So what excites you most about this project?
Well, so can I say everything?
Yeah, okay, good.
Well, I think what excites me most is that, we as a community, we often talk about the things I just talked about, right? Namely, the all-round excellence and campus. But the 2030 project, because it's framed in the context of a problem that is very easy to relate to, right? An existential problem for society. One that is big, one that is global, one that's a systems challenge, that requires us to understand and harness the forces of biology, the forces of life, the forces of technology, on scales that start where university professors excel, the molecular scale, but actually needs to end with solutions that matter in the world. I think that is truly exciting because it really does require folks who are not just good in the technology sides, right? Not just good in agriculture, but who understand policy and who understands the importance of actually getting that right and having a voice at the table at the right time. And so it's really a unique opportunity to pretty much put all the forces on deck, right? Or all the hands on deck in a campus community with a rich history to help us move towards solutions or problem that I think is the important one of our time.
Oh, that's incredible. So let's get into the nitty-gritty. How can engineering help address agriculture and food challenges like deployment of agrivoltaic strategies and digital agriculture-based efficiency improvements?
I'm personally excited about agrivoltaics, in part because I'm excited about the journey we've been on.
So could you explain what agrivoltaics are?
Yeah, oh, sure, yeah. So you've heard of photovoltaics, most of you in the audience, which is the idea that you can harness energy from the sun inexpensively to generate electricity in a carbon-free manner. Now, one of the obvious challenges of that is that it requires, lots of area coverage of solar farms. And often the best place to locate those farms are in farmlands. And the challenge, of course, is how do we reconcile the need for carbon-free energy with the need for food, right? And the responsibility of leveraging agriculture to feed more people. And so agrivoltaics is a kind of mashed up word that attempts to say, well, you know, we can do both. And we can do both by intentionally engineering photovoltaic systems, engineering the agricultural crops, understanding the dynamic between the sun's trajectory in any given diurnal cycle and what plants need in that cycle, and doing that in a way that maximizes both. And I can go a little bit because it's exciting in that it's a systems problem. I mean, obviously there's an agriculture component. There's obviously a agri-tech component, right? So understanding in a sort of fundamental measured way what and when plant need solar energy and how to sort of mitigate the impacts of screening from solar utilities. But on a more sort of agroeconomic scale, it gives the farmers an opportunity to use their land to generate value in ways that are different, right, from traditional farming. And so it produces a certain interesting hybrid characteristic that requires optimization in terms of, is it a plant? Is it a solar farm? What height is the solar farm? What do I plant? And I think that is an area where data-driven decisions, a component of engineering that is really not so often talked about, that is coming into its own, where we take all that data, we study it over time, and we figure out how to leverage it for solutions that matter for farmers, for society, and we think ultimately for the world.
That's great. So what about digital agriculture, Dean Archer? Because what we see is this tremendous need to increase food production globally, but at the same time, we face, in many cases, challenging labor shortages. So how does this all come together?
Yeah, well, it's a great question, and I think that it comes together because of this preponderance of technology that we're now faced with, right? I mean, every one of us carry in our hand this incredibly powerful little computer that we often use just as a telephone. But it's something that potentially allows us to collect data. And if we collect the right data, store it in the right way, have access to it in the right manner, integrate it into systems that actually can support agriculture, it provides a revolutionary possibility in agriculture. Now, Susan McCooch, who hopefully is listening somewhere, provided a little bit of insight that, so I do gardening, and I've observed, as most gardeners, that plants communicate with each other. And there's this really interesting thing where you do something to a plant over here, and there's no physical connection to one over the few yards away, but somehow there's a connection. And so Susan, has this perspective that says plants are talking all the time. They're engaging with each other all the time, but they're engaging in a language that we don't speak often, and the language is chemistry. And the question is, how do we harness the advances in data and the ability to store that data, to retrieve that data, to interpret that language, to understand what the plant wants, when it needs it, so we can intervene in the right way with water, with sunlight, and so forth, to sort of maximize productivity. And that, of course, doesn't end with green plants. It extends to other domains of agriculture, whether it's livestock and so on. And so I think that we're at this critical juncture where technology and data, and by extension AI tools, are about to disrupt pretty much every field of society. And I think digital agriculture is a really intentional way of getting in front of it by thinking through, how do we design the systems that allow us to measure, to store, and ultimately to take action based on the data collected. So it's a really fun and exciting time.
Very much so. So we're here at Grow New York, and today and tomorrow are all about innovation and commercialization. And so how does that intersect with your goals related to the 2030 project?
Again, another wonderful question. So I've always thought that Cornell's unique positioning as a a first-rate Ivy University with a land grant mission provides a kind of unusual context for how we think about innovation, right? So, historically, the land grant mission, the extension mission, has been interpreted to mean, well, we interact, we engage with the community. But I think as we turn the corner towards the Climate Action Plan and now towards the 2030 project, there's an understanding that our responsibility doesn't end with that published paper or that patent written, that our responsibility is to set the companies up that derive from those innovations to be successful in the market. And so I think that the connection is, in my view, one-to-one. How do you take a university, take a community that is excellent in the sort of traditional ways of scholarship and innovation and make it excellent in terms of impact, right? How we push the innovations in the university out into the world so they can have an impact in society. And how do we do that more efficiently than our competitors, right? And so I think that the 2030 project, for it to be successful in bending the curves, the warming curve, the carbon curve, and doing it equitably, will require us to, have our unfair share of successes in moving things that we innovate in the university laboratory out into the world with great alacrity to have the impacts we need.
I think that's great. And so what are the next steps? So you're in this process, and where do you go from here? Obviously, there is a timeline on this with the year 2030.
Yes.
But where are you at in the stages of development?
Well, so we are early stage. It's I'd like to say we're through the ideation phase of this. So, for context, the 2030 project was hatched up by a group of 3 deans. Dean Holton, who you're going to hear from later this week, the Dean of the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, Dean Jayawardena, who's the Dean of Arts and Sciences, myself, and David Lodge, who is the Director of the Cornell Atkinson. And we spent a lot of time, just thinking about how do we harness these resources that we love to talk about and integrate them towards a solution. We succeeded in doing that and defining specific goals. And now the question is really about how do we activate those goals? How do we identify the places where Cornell, not by doing everything, but by focusing on the things where we can have maximum impact, how do we achieve those impacts in the world? So out of the gate, the first thing out of the gate is a competitive seed grant funding opportunity where individual investigators, groups of investigators, present little bite-sized ideas that with investment could actually become bigger ideas. And so we just completed the first round of these grants. And we're actually constantly looking for other opportunities so we can grow that initiative to include more participants so we can have, in fact, as you rightly said, Kathy, this breaking down of silos between departments to maximize impact.
I think that's great. So as this progresses, we have lots of entrepreneurs, lots of innovators here in this forum, but also watching this on the internet. Our land grant mission at Cornell necessitates that we push this knowledge out to the wide world to make the world a better place. But I think at the same time, there's going to be plenty of opportunities for entrepreneurs to get involved, to make sure that the science and the discovery that you're uncovering is going to make it out into the marketplace so it really can make a difference. And that is very exciting. That
is super exciting. And it's not, I would argue, it's exciting in an active way, right? So I think about the work that CREA is doing in terms of developing I-Core education information that teaches entrepreneurs, how to basically discover product market fit, right? How do you decide ahead of time where to concentrate your energy to address pain points of potential customers right away, right? That, has been proven to be a successful strategy for getting things to market quickly. How do you, train PhD students who are laser focused on the depths of technology to begin to think about the impact of their work? How do you, educate undergraduates who are really, really bright and don't have time but somehow find time to do all sorts of things? How do you train them so that they can actually invest that energy in building entrepreneurial culture and instincts that allow us, again, with more alacrity to bring products to market? How do you create an ecosystem at a major land-grant Ivy University with all the talent I just described in a way that makes it easier for faculty members, for students, for postdocs to essentially find resources needed to start companies? These are challenges we're confronting head-on campus, and I expect, just as the 2030 project blazes ahead, sprints ahead to 2030, you're going to see lots of parallel initiatives around innovation and tech transfer develop that I think will kind of catalyze each other for this big impact that we need.
That's amazing, and we have many, many exciting times ahead. So glad that you're helping to lead the effort, Dean Archer, and it's been a great conversation, wonderful way to kick off Grow New York, and I want to thank you for your time today.
No, well, thank you for the invitation, and thank you all for listening. I mean, it's never been a better time to be doing what we're doing, and I think that the last couple of years have taught us that, global disruptions have a very long, fat tail, and it's important that we stay in front of them. And I think the climate catastrophe that's looming, if we don't do anything, is one that galvanizes everybody, including this engineering dean. So thank you, and I hope the conference, the event, turns out to be as successful as planned, and I look forward to staying in tune.